For several years now, I've had a bit of an obsession with Afghanistan. Because of this obsession, I'm excited whenever I hear about a movie set in Afghanistan. And as a lover of animation, I am doubly excited when it's an animation film. But every time I watch one, there's this lingering question. Is this film really about Afghanistan? Or is it about a Western idea of what Afghanistan seems to be? In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 animation films. Breadwinner, an Irish animation film from 2017, The Swallows of Kabul, a French production from 2019, and that which I consider to be one of the best animation films I've ever seen, Flee, a Danish documentary from 2021. Attention, there will be spoilers for all 3 of these films. If you want to hear only about one of these films, skip to the timestamps below, and if you like this video, don't forget to hit thumbs up and subscribe. As a small channel, it actually really helps. Before the video starts, I just wanted to call your attention to the recent earthquakes which have hit the region of Herat in Afghanistan, leading to terrible suffering of hundreds of thousands of people. If you can, please donate. You can find links in the description to UNHCR, Doctors Without Borders, and the International Rescue Committee. The Breadwinner was released in 2017, and it tells the story of Parvana, a young Afghan girl living under the Taliban regime who starts dressing like a boy to help her family after her father is arrested. Throughout the film, Parvana tells the story of a boy trying to save his village from losing their harvest due to the feared Elephant King, and the quest of the boy mirrors Parvana's trying to save her father from prison. The animation inspired by traditional Afghan art is gorgeous. And this imagery of tales from this distant Afghanistan full of color and dancing are a contrast to the mostly muted colors of the modern-day Kabul, even though the animation is still hauntingly beautiful. The film is also sprinkled with many details of Afghan culture, from the shared plate of rice, the bazaars, the morning prayers. It also has many scenes showing the brutality of the Taliban regime, how women can't go outside without a male guardian, how they must hide under a burqa, how books and learning are forbidden, and also the random beatings and arrests. At the same time though, it also gives some nuance to the story, showing that not everyone who joined the Taliban is doing it for conviction or cruelty. The director Nora Twomey stated that, for her, animation was the perfect medium to generate empathy.
I think animation has an ability to help you empathize with characters in a way that if watching a live action girl go through some of these things might be so traumatic that you would disengage, I think, emotionally from it. So for me, animation is a perfect medium by which you can multi-layer your story, in a way that adults will get some things out of it, but children will get other things out of it, but yet we're all watching the same film.
The Breadwinner was praised by critics as a great animation film, especially due to the direction and the voice work. But many did not overlook the fact that it was a film based on a book written by a Westerner, writer Deborah Ellis, whose Wikipedia bio reads "concerned with the sufferings of persecuted children in the Third World," directed and produced by Westerners, even though Afghan artists and organizations were also involved in the production. This explains why some details resonated so much with Afghans. I actually went to see The Breadwinner with Afghan refugees in the cinema, and they loved it. But although I do find the film very heartwarming, I can't seem to shake a feeling that it's like a fable we tell ourselves of Afghan resistance, especially now that the Taliban are back in power. In the film, Parvana's parents are a mother who is a writer and a father who is a professor. They are educated, cultured people who love storytelling. They are people we can easily associate with as Westerners, despite their clothing, food, and religion. They are presented as the exception to the rule. In the film, the enemies are the Taliban and their fanatics, as if they are demons who have come to haunt Parvana and her loved ones. As the film closes, we see family members reunited, but it is not necessarily a happy ending, as another war is starting. It is a Western-made war, the NATO invasion of Afghanistan. The onset of the war was deliberately included in the film, as a way to acknowledge this part of Afghan history, as another cycle of destruction begins. The Swallows of Kabul is a French film featuring gorgeous 2D watercolor-style animation. Visually, it is truly an accomplishment. The setting is also life under Taliban rule in Kabul. It follows 2 couples, Atik, a prison warden, and his terminally ill wife Musarat, and historian Mohsen and artist Zunaira, portrayed as young and in love. However, one argument between Mohsen and Zunaira leads to her accidentally killing him. She is discovered by the Taliban and sentenced to die. As they organize her execution, she is taken to the prison where Atik works. Although Atik is presented initially as cold and even cruel husband to Musarat, seeing Zunaira in her cell awakens something in him that leads him to question his passivity towards the Taliban regime. In the end, Atik and his wife save Zunaira from execution by sacrificing themselves. The film's very soft watercolors really contrast with the many gut-wrenching moments of life under the Taliban regime. From the burqas, the beatings, the highly anticipated public executions. When I first saw this film, I thought that it seemed to take many of the articles and books I read about Afghanistan and make them come to light. Only after I discovered it had not been based on any Afghan story, but rather on the book by Algerian writer Yasmina Khadra from 2002, who probably read some of the same sources as me. Same as The Breadwinner, it is not so much a story of Afghans, but rather a fable about Afghans. I also don't think it is a coincidence that this film was produced in France, based on a book by a writer living in France. French people have been fascinated with the Afghan resistance for decades, ever since the Northern Alliance commander Ahmad Shah Massoud became the face of the armed resistance against the Taliban regime. He was an educated man who spoke French fluently. He became a darling of the press and politicians in France and helped to make fighting the Taliban in Afghanistan a cause célèbre in the country, becoming a household name. In France, just as in the United States, and in a way the rest of the Western world, life under the Taliban has become a narrative device to understand the Afghan people. Therefore, if you tell a story about Afghans, it needs to be a story of resistance, and it needs to be a story against the Taliban. Once again, we meet Afghans who prove to be the exception. Zunaira is a talented artist with an open mind rivaling that of any adventurous Western art student. She, like Parvana's cultured family, is exceptional yet relatable. Only someone as special and unusual as Zunaira could awake Atik, a common Afghan, from his slumber and drive him to action. Zunaira's resistance, as depicted in the film though, especially the underground schools mentioned, reminded me of another Afghan woman. Mina Keshwar Kamal, founder of the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, or RAWA, she organized underground schools, combated fundamentalists, and advocated for the rights of women. If you want to learn about an Afghan feminism that has nothing to do with Madeleine Albright or Hillary Clinton, you should definitely check her out. But Mina was assassinated in 1987, before the Taliban ever came to power, back when Afghanistan only had supposed freedom fighters. That is partially why I doubt that Mina is as attractive as a character as someone as Zunaira, who, although is presented as a very brave and fascinating woman, is mostly a mirror on which we can project our ideal of the Afghan woman eternally resisting the patriarchy. As the directors themselves agree, this is a universal story that used the cage of the Taliban as an allegory, and not necessarily one about Afghanistan.
On parle de Kaboul, on parle de ce qui s'est passé là, mais il n'y a pas que ça. C'est vrai que plus largement, la contrainte qui est proposée aux femmes dans tellement de pays, c'est aussi l'image de la cage.
The Swallows of Kabul is still a fascinating film, and I do enjoy it as a fable about the power of beauty, both physical and of character, to disrupt someone's soul and encourage bravery. But it is not a film I'll see to understand Afghanistan any better. Flea is by far one of the best animation films I have ever seen. It is a documentary about a middle-aged academic with the pseudonym Amin who opens up about his past as a refugee from Afghanistan. I think part of the reason this film is so good and really stands out is because it is an authentic story told by an Afghan. It is directed by a Danish friend of his, and so throughout the film we place ourselves in the role of the filmmaker asking the questions. Amin doesn't give up the answers easily. He says it can take months or years to be ready to talk about things. And we have to be patient. We feel like we are being granted a privilege to have the story shared. We don't feel like we are owed knowing all about his past. The authenticity of this film extends to the language spoken. In Flea, you actually hear long conversations in Dari, which you don't really hear in either The Breadwinner or Swallows of Kabul. It is also interesting that the film centers around the experience of an Afghan refugee, one of the 8.2 million who live across the world. In Flea, the Mujahideen are the enemy that forces Amin and his family to escape, though his father was already arrested previously by the communists. The Mujahideen who threaten his family are the freedom fighters who America supported to beat the communists and the Russians. The complexity of Afghan history is interwoven with Amin's family tragedies, but no faction is presented as heroic. Amin and his family escape Kabul at the last minute before the city falls in the hands of the Mujahideen. They go to Moscow on a tourist visa where they first encounter the humiliations and dangers of being undocumented. They are then forced to wait years for his older brother in Sweden to get enough money to pay traffickers to smuggle them into Europe. The film does not shy away from showing the violence of being smuggled in a closed container, risking drowning, or trekking for miles in a snowstorm. One of the most haunting images of the film is a refugee stranded on a boat of a trafficker, lost and without hope, until they see a cruise ship. There couldn't be a sharper contrast between tourists and the refugees. Far from being relieved, Amin is embarrassed. Then, instead of rescuing them, the cruise ship calls the Estonian border police, who mistreat and lock away the refugees in an abandoned building for months. They are deported back to Russia, and Amin has to try again with another, more expensive trafficker, and finally makes it to Denmark alone. Midway in the film, we discover Amin has been lying about his family being dead for asylum reasons, as instructed by his trafficker. It is a story Amin has been telling everyone until now, and it shows how isolated he has been all these years, alone with the secret. Amin's family are not presented as being particularly virtuous or exceptional. The trait that sets Amin apart the most is being gay and how he slowly figures that out about himself. One of the best scenes of the film actually plays a lot with our prejudice. When Amin comes out to his family, I was expecting scenes of violence. When his brother says he's taking him somewhere, I really thought it was going to be either a brothel or a beating. And then, it's a gay bar. It's such an amazing scene, and it's the climax of the film, as Amin finally feels accepted by his family. As we hear Amin's story in his own words, we don't feel like this film is a voyeuristic look into his life, something that only benefits the audience. Somehow, it feels almost therapeutic, as Amin embracing his real story is what he needs before he can embrace his future with a loving partner.
I think back then there wasn't much time to take time and feel and see how things felt, because we had to move on all the time. If there were any setbacks, we had to back on our feet and try to survive. But after making the movie, I really got the chance to allow myself and feel how it felt back then, because probably I'm in a place in my life where I'm safe, then there's more room to experience these feelings, and the movie really connected this.
I really can't recommend this film enough if you want to understand all the complexities of migration, and it is also a very interesting snapshot into the life of an Afghan family forced to flee. In this video, I focused on 3 Western films about Afghanistan and what they say of our perception of this country. I wish I could have found an equally popular Afghan animation film for comparison, but unfortunately I was not able to. That's because the production of animation films is still very recent in Afghanistan, for understandable reasons. Cinema in Afghanistan is still a fledgling industry. Unlike in neighboring Iran, Afghan films produced by Afghans in Afghanistan are still few and far between, especially animation films. With the Taliban back in power now, that will probably not change anytime soon. If you've seen these films, I'd love to know your thoughts and how they shaped your idea of Afghanistan. Although I did criticize them a bit, I did love watching them, and I think they are still worth seeing. I hope we can start a conversation down below in the comments, and if you like this video, don't forget to hit thumbs up and subscribe.